Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. As you can see, hopefully on slide 1 there, that during the webinar you're automatically on mute. We'll be taking questions at the end of the session where we'll turn the mute sound off so you can hear each other. This webinar will be recorded. If you have a question, though, in the meantime, you can click on the raised hand on your computer, and the panelist here will be able to view the questions that you're asking, as will I. And I can answer that question if it's appropriate at the time, or if you've got anything in particular, if you want to type a question in as I'm going through the presentation, then please do so. And if I don't answer it immediately, I'll try and pick it up at the end. So you can type your questions using the chat panel or the Q&A panel at any time. Please make sure that you send all typed messages to both host and panelist so that we both catch them. Okay. So the next hour is going to be looking at the question, are your business continuity arrangements up to standard? And what does that actually mean? So I'm Martin Fenlon. I recognise some of the names. My day job is at the Houses of Parliament doing business continuity management for them, and I also lecture here at the college. So what I want to share with you is some of my experiences of implementing BS 25999 and now ISO 22301. And what does that actually mean? As I go around the country and indeed around other countries, a question often comes up, is it good enough? What's good enough? So I want to just share some thoughts with you and then happy to enter into a discussion. So as I say, I'll be taking you through what you need to be asking of your own organisation. So I'm going to make an assumption that the people who've been invited to take part in this webinar are BC practitioners or have some responsibility within their own organisation. And I think it is a question that you'll be familiar with if that is your role, where people say, how does this add value to our organisation? Are we doing enough? Is it good enough? In other words, what are the benefits to the organisation of having a good business continuity management capability? And I think it's a valid question, bearing in mind the investment that organisations make in this topic. So what I want to be able to do is, by the end of perhaps in the next 40 minutes or so, explain what is meant by business resilience, and we're going to look at language quite a bit and look at the meanings behind some of these phrases and how it fits. How does business continuity fit in with other resilience capabilities? A quick word on the latest industry standards, and then we'll go through the life cycle, saying the different activities that you should be able to demonstrate to say that your business resilience capability is up to standard. As I say, we're going to look at language because that is something that has changed with ISO 22301 as well. And it's an open question, really. Is it semantics? For example, changing from top management buy-in to the word leadership that's used in ISO 22301. So some of it you may see semantics, but I'll just try to explain what I think they are after by changing the terminology. And finally, so far everything I've been talking about there is about a capability for your organisation, but I just want to say a few words about, as practitioners, how do we show that we are up to standard as business continuity management professionals. So a little bit about individual competence. Okay. So the first thing is, in terms of an overview of business continuity management, you will get asked the question, what is it? What is business continuity management? And I hope you've got a phrase up your sleeve that you can explain very quickly to people. For what it's worth, the one I often use is, I would say, what if? Business continuity is about, what if you couldn't get in? What if your car didn't start? What if whatever? And it starts a conversation. I'll give you the official definition in a couple of slides. But that what if question starts a conversation where you can talk about what is business continuity. It's about giving you a capability to respond to a disruption. But I'm going to argue later it's much more than that, because often you will have a disruption or a major disruption in some organisations for months, maybe years. So there must be more benefits than just having a capability ready to kick in just in case. So have a phrase up your sleeve ready to say what it is and how you sell the benefits. The example I often use at the college is a taxi driver picked me up once and said, what am I talking about at a conference? And I said business continuity. He said, what's that? So you need a phrase. So I said, well, what if your car didn't start this morning? What would you do? He explained that he works in the day and he has a friend who works at night. If his car didn't start, he's got an arrangement to get his friend's car. And I said, that's what I'm talking about, business continuity. What is critical to you to maintain your business? And what's your plan B? But business continuity is part of a wider resilience capability. And when the Civil Contingencies Act came in, it was one of the duties under the Act for some responders who are listening to this have a statutory duty to do business continuity as part of a wider resilience agenda. So you can see there, if you look at the bottom, in terms of building UK resilience, there's a number of duties, such as you need plans, you need a risk assessment of the risk of an emergency occurring in your community. You need business continuity, warn and inform, cooperate, share information, and also to promote business continuity. So people from a local authority listening to this, I'm going to mention the Dummies Guide to Business Continuity, which may be a useful tool to promote for small businesses. But you can see there, business continuity is just one, but they overlap with a range of other duties, such as warning and informing. How do you get messages out to your key stakeholders in the event of a disruption? And that is an added clause to ISO 22301. It's more robust on communications. The other bit on the who side, we all do business continuity looking at our own organisation and seeing what do we do, what's critical. But often there's a whole range of other people that we need to be linked in with and in order to respond effectively. And that could go down to, for private sector people listening, it's your supply chain and your key stakeholders. So how do you know they're resilient? Who else do you need to involve in your business continuity arrangements? The who at the top is starting to talk about in your organisation, what level is business continuity promoted? Who's involved? Is it operational staff? Do you have middle managers, tactical, or is it just a strategic capability that's talked about by senior managers from time to time? At the top, there's a capability called Integrated Emergency Management for the UK. In business continuity terms, we'd probably call that plan, do, check and act. What system have you got in place to anticipate disruption, try to prevent it and prepare? When it does happen, how are you going to respond and recover? So you can see some read across here to wider resilience activities. And then going down this side, where? Is it just an office? Is it a department? Is it the whole organisation? Are you regionally based? Have you got national or indeed international links in your organisation that you need to be aware of when you're planning your business continuity? And then finally at the bottom there'll be other work streams outside of your particular area. So in the case of UK resilience, there could be work streams like dealing with mass casualties. What's the policy on, say, a national fuel strike? How does that fit with your own capability? So that's the capability streams are thinking about what else is going on in the environment in which your business, and you're in the business of providing service, what context does it operate in, and what else do you need to be aware of as you build business continuity as a capability? And that's why it's complex. If you look at any of the elements, I think they're fairly straightforward. It's when you put it all together is the complexity. And sometimes it gets to the too difficult to do box. But what we're offering here is, when you say, is your business continuity management arrangements up to standards, it's saying, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? And I'll take you through some elements. But there's the definition of business continuity management. And I won't read it all. A lot of people switch off after the word holistic. So I think it was written by a committee, and you can see why people want to add a bit more to it. But some key words in there is that it's for the whole management. It's not just for a silo. You need to anticipate what could go wrong. It provides a framework for resilience. So how you're going to respond, how you're going to recover. Why you're doing it is another point. So it's to safeguard the interest of your key stakeholders in your organisation. And I've added that in because if you notice, that's taken from BS 25999, but it's exactly the same definition in ISO 22301. So that doesn't change. And in fact, 22301 is 80%, 90% BS 25999, in my opinion. So what we're looking for is the capability to be able to respond to a disruption. And just to be clear, when people say, is my business continuity capability up to scratch? What I would say is, first of all, business continuity is two things. It's about incident management, so who will do what in the event of a disruption? And that's your command and control and coordination. And secondly, what are you going to do, which is business continuity. So incident management is who, and business continuity is what. Now, the incident management, when we as a college achieved BS 25999 certification, one of the things we got picked up on by the external auditor was, if you give somebody a role in your business continuity arrangements, have you defined what competence they need and what authority have they got? Is that different than their day job? So, for example, if you have somebody who's going to be an incident manager, are they allowed to authorise a certain amount of funds in the event of a disruption? Or do they have to go through a procurement process? So what are the arrangements that you've got? And we said we would just use our credit cards at the time and claim it back, but it wasn't written down anywhere. So if you do go for the certification, one of the things, the key words that come out of both standards now is it should be documented. So everything that you do that's in scope should be documented, so that when you're asked a question, they'll just say, and where's that written down? So if you have that in the back of your mind, when you say, are we up to standard, you can answer the question, but somebody needs to be saying at the end of each conversation, and where's that written down? So it's a little thing to take away, because often we have tacit knowledge in an organisation, and you gain it through years of experience. If you want to follow the standard, they're very keen on it should be documented. Then you have business continuity, which is, out of all the things we do, what's critical. By criticality, we mean what will hurt your organisation the most in the shortest amount of time. So an example of that would be, it's not importance, it's about what will hurt you the most. So I'm sitting in the college now at just gone 8 o'clock in the morning, and in terms of criticality, the chief exec, I don't know where he is, whether he's here, whether he comes in later today, tomorrow, next week, probably doesn't affect the running of the organisation in order to provide this sort of service. However, we just told the cleaner off for hoovering just outside, and if the cleaners and the chef didn't come in, the college would notice immediately. So criticality is about what hurt us the most in the shortest amount of time. It's not about importance. And then if you decide what you're going to maintain and to what level through business continuity, you also need to define what we recover first. What sort of order will you recover your critical activities in your key products and services. And all that you can do before any incident. So the big choice for you and your senior managers is how much of this do you do beforehand and prepare, and how much do you just say, well, actually, we'll make it up on the day. And you can define that in the scope of your business continuity management system and work towards that. So that is looking at the differences between incident management and BC. But you need both if you're going to follow the industry standard. The other thing you might want to think about is, in terms of your response structures, is it all or nothing in your organisation? If you had an incident, do you just invoke the plan and there's one plan, or do you go to a level 1, a level 2, a level 3? And that's something for you, again, to document. As people start off, they tend to have one business continuity plan, and it's either on or off. So as it matures, though, you may say, actually, we're going to go to a level 1 and not activate the whole of the organisation. We're going to have different stages depending on the incident. So as it matures, you get more sophisticated. So far I've been talking about standards and referring to them, but I'm also going to be referring to the BCI, Business Continuity Institute's Good Practice Guidelines 2010. The reason for that is I'm going to go on to talk about, which I think is a very useful model, the life cycle. Now the life cycle is in 25999, but not in ISO 22301. So rather than just, it's there implicitly, but you don't see that lovely circle of the life cycle. So that it still is part of Good Practice Guidelines 2010. So that's why I'm going to refer to this. And also at the end, I'll talk more about these guidelines, because if you are a BC professional, this is the book that you need to read. And the exam, if you do the BCI or exam, is all based on what's in this book. It doesn't refer to the standards, which is about your business continuity management system. This book is about your individual competence. And I'll say a bit more about that at the end. So there's the cycle, and if you're like me, not anymore, but I used to have it as a screensaver, so that's how sad I was. But you've got the 6 stages there that, again, I'm going to keep going back to the question of the webinar, is your business continuity management system up to standard? I'll be looking for evidence, if I came into audit, of these 6 stages. So the first one is around BCM policy and program management. Where's the document that specifies what your organisation has agreed to do, and at what level in the organisation is that signed off? Has it been resourced appropriately? You then need to look at understanding your organisation, and that's where your business impact analysis comes from. What do you do? When do you do it? Who does it? Where do they do it? Can anyone else do it? And maybe even a more profound question, why do you do it? But you need some system there that we call the business impact analysis process to identify what's critical and what can wait. The next stage is determining your strategy. So what options, strategic options, did you consider and decide on, and how did you come to that process? Where's the documented system to say that these are the number of options we had, and this is how we chose to respond to a particular disruption, such as the loss of staff, the loss of a building, if the IT goes down, etc. What's your strategic response as an organisation to those sorts of things? Then you get into developing and embedding, and that's where you are looking at capturing all that discussion into a document. And if I can use my mouse here, what I've seen a lot of people do is go from this bit saying, yes, we need to have this in place, it's good practice, and give it to somebody, which might have been you, write a plan, developing and embedding, and can I have it in 3 months, please? If they came to the college, so sometimes they're sent to the emergency planning college to do a course in business continuity, we would explain to them that you can't just go from here to here, but you'll need to look at understanding the organisation and determine strategies before you can start putting pen to paper. And you're probably looking at 18 months cycle to do this, probably 5 years to embed it. Charles Handy said it takes 5 years to change a culture. So it's a life cycle. It's a program of work, ongoing program. And sometimes senior managers need to hear that, and it needs to be resourced appropriately. Whereas we have had people saying, I've got 3 months to write this plan, which is doable, but that's more of a Google business continuity and then a cut and paste job. And I would argue that that's not a business continuity plan because it hasn't been tested for a start. So that's the cycle, and you're still, ISO 22301 is all about have you got evidence of this, of these things in place. So one of the things they would look at is what's the likelihood, this is risk management, likelihood and impact. So where would business continuity management fit in this sort of matrix? Is it for the things that are high impact and high probability? They're going to hurt your organisation and they're going to happen next week. That's around here. We would say with those sort of risks, you would need to take action. So that's do something now, because you know it's going to happen and it's going to hurt you. For impacts that would hurt you but probably won't happen, it's about making sure that you have good management processes in place. So, for example, you know some of your staff are going to go off sick, so you have, that's called day-to-day management. If it's low probability, low impact, some people say we'll just ignore those risks. I think good practice would say you would monitor them. But business continuity used to be up in the top left, but now I've put it round about there, because if you do a good BIA, you are also looking at a range of risk, uncovering some risks, single points of failure. So it's not just about having the capability to respond to the high impact but very low probability event as it used to be seen. I think now it adds more value, and that's an important selling point for business continuity. So just explain the difference between risk and BC. If you built or bought a data centre and built it on a floodplain because the land is cheaper, then risk management would say, let's put flood defences in. And so you've got all these flood defences, you're managing and you're mitigating the risk of flooding. Business continuity would kick in where the water tower on your data centre bursts and flooded your data centre. What was your plan to deal with the lack of data? So it's not about cause, it's about consequences over time. Risk management is about likelihood of something happening, what could happen, and how would it hurt us. Business continuity is, I don't care what causes it, what's the consequences of losing that critical activity over time. And that's, so they link, but they're different. Okay, a bit of audience participation time. If I asked you to, and I think you can click or type in now, so there's a little test. If you had to write down what does probably mean, if I said something's probably going to happen, if it's 0% would say it's definitely not going to happen, and 100% mean it's definitely going to happen, what does probably mean in percentage terms? What figure would you give that? If you could just type that in, that would be quite interesting to see. And you do that by clicking on the chat button. If you can see that, it'd be interesting just for you to just type in a number there. What does probably mean on a scale of 0 is not going to happen, or 100% is going to happen? Okay, so we're seeing ranges from just over 50%, perhaps up to 75%. And when I've run this before, we've had, I think most people have put sort of round at least 50%. But I've also seen people say, well, if they're probably, I think about 90%. Now, you're just using one word. You can imagine in an incident, I said, this is probably going to happen. If you hear that word probably and say, it's 90%, 75%, it's a bit different than somebody saying, well, it's 50-50. So we're using one word that could be interpreted in a number of different ways. And that's important when you start to look at language and looking at definitions. So I'll just read out a couple of other examples where if you don't get the language right, it can backfire. Some of these are a bit more light-hearted about it. Some insurance claims, real-life insurance claims, reading what people actually write in a claim. Somebody wrote, after a car accident, this line, I had to swerve several times before I hit him. Another one wrote, I've been driving for 40 years before I fell asleep at the wheel. Or one where they installed a bathroom, they said, it was only when I sat on my new toilet that I noticed my crack. Now, each of these things can be read in many different ways. So when we're looking at business continuity, we're trying to say, when you use that word, what do we actually mean? And I've given you the key tension word, which was about critical. Some people have accidentally used the word important and upset many departments by saying you are not important, when they really mean you are not critical, or the activities you provide are not urgent following a disruption. Here's a number of scenarios that we often talk about on courses at the college, and I'm just going to pick out a couple just to say, when we talk about is your business continuity management up to standard, what sort of things should you have taken into account? So, picture one was a chemical recycling plant, and it blew up on a Friday. I often ask, what's the critical activities for a chemical recycling plant? And the answer is to recycle chemicals. So their organisation will need to think about, after an incident like that, what do they do? In this particular case, they transferred operations to another part of Europe and directed tankers and whatever to maintain their business. There's a load of other implications for local authorities, for businesses in that area, but the business continuity implications for the company that owned that was pretty clear. There were lots of other issues about staff welfare, jobs, following this incident. But in terms of BC, it was pretty clear. What's our organisation about? What do we do? What's critical? Then just picking out a couple of other ones here. In picture 6 is a picture of the Ladbroke Grove crash. And that starts to look at, in terms of business continuity terms, an incident like that. You've been doing work on your critical activities in your business, but this incident was external to many organisations, and for many of their senior managers, they couldn't get in to work because of that disruption. Some organisations had an arrangement where 2 senior managers had to sign the checkbook. One of them was on the train. So what do they do after that? Where are the single points of failure? And it's an example of when you look at business continuity, how far down the supply chain or in your organisation do you go? You start to ask your staff, where do they live? What dependents have they got? If they're in a critical post, you want to know, are they a single point of failure? Are they available? So it broadens when you get into developing and maturing your business continuity capability. It raises many questions. And it goes back to my original definition, what if? And you're constantly asking that question, what if? What if? And hopefully your business continuity management system is generic and flexible enough to cope with a range of scenarios. And you'll only know that by testing them. Right, some of you may have seen this book. It came out a couple of weeks ago, so part of the Wiley series of For Dummies. The Cabinet Office have sponsored this, so Stuart Sterling there was chairing this group. It's a very useful book for SMEs. Certainly if you've looked at BS 25999 or ISO 22301, they're not the sort of documents to put in a flyer to organisations to say you should be doing this. That's not what they're intended for. This book, though, is written by practitioners and gives lots of useful tips. You can dip in and out of it. So if you have any responsibility to engage some of your suppliers, SME suppliers, or to promote business continuity, it's probably worth having a look at this and using examples from it, because it's very accessible, and it's something that I think is another example of how this area, business continuity, is growing as a discipline. So please make sure you are aware of this as a resource. So what are we trying to achieve? Is your business continuity up to standard? This model here says that in some organisations there may be people who intellectually don't really know what they're doing. I haven't read any plans, and emotionally I don't really care because I just do my job when I go home. These could be weak links in a disruption. For many more organisations, I think, you could say, well, they might not think about disruptions, but if our business was disrupted, they'll be there for me. They've got heart, emotional buy-in, big hearts, but I haven't read any plan. We call these people loose cannons. They'll muddle through, do their best, but they haven't followed a plan. So sometimes they could duplicate effort or contradict effort. They mean well, but they haven't followed the plan. You may have others in your organisation that will say all the right things, attend webinars, keep up to date with best practice, but really they don't think it will happen to them, it happens to other people. So intellectually they're bought in, but emotionally they don't think this is their top priority. These sort of things don't happen to them or to their organisation. And what we're trying to get through is your business continuity up to standard, is people who know what they're doing intellectually, so they read the plans, they've done the BIAs, but also they're mindful that this could happen tomorrow. And these would be your champions. And you want champions at every level. Every level and at every stage of that business continuity life cycle. So once you've got your plan that we got up to here, you then need to know, does it work? And that's where exercising comes in. Does the plan work? You also need to maintain, which is ongoing, and review, which is at single point in time. I should be able to look in your diary and I can see when you're going to review your BCMS. Who are all the key stakeholders or interested parties, as we now say, that will be around the table to review, is this capability still fit for purpose? And as you do that, you build your culture, which I'll come on to do, because that's the hardest bit that people say, how do I sell it into my organisation? So we've got the life cycle from 25999 and the good practice guidelines. What is kept in ISO 22301 is your plan, do, check and act, and that should be for every part of your organisation. So every part of your business continuity management system is broken down into plan, do, check and act. What would I look for when it's up to standard? Well, here are the key clauses of ISO 22301, and I've broken them down into plan, do, check and act. So the first few clauses are set in the context of things like the glossary and how the standard was written. But the meat of it starts at clause 4, introduces the requirements necessary to establish the context of your business continuity management system. So the first thing to say is, if you say it's up to standard, when we say the standards are written for a system, it's not about a plan, it's about what's your system in place for resilience. So clause 4 and under the plan bit, clause 4s, 5, 6 and 7, what I'll be looking for there is there a current business continuity policy? What's your framework for rolling out resilience over the next few years? Has it been signed off by senior managers? So that's the policy, it sets the framework. Some will also have a strategy that says in order to implement this policy, we will do the following things over the next 3 years, something like that. So that's looking at BC policy and strategy signed off by your leadership. to use the phrase of ISO 22301. Who are the people responsible for your organisation? I'd also be looking for documented management activities in your BCMS. So we're looking at how do you do business continuity? What forms have you got, such as the BIA? Do you run workshops? What templates have you got? Have you got a database? So how do you capture the information? So it's looking at, as you build your business continuity, where's the evidence that you've got a system in place, and crucially that it's current. So ISO 22301 says that the stated objectives of your BC policy, how do you know you've achieved it? Have you got some clear objectives that have been measured and reviewed on a regular basis? And I'll be looking for evidence of that. You then got the doing, so have you actually got a plan in place? So when there is a disruption, I'd be looking for the evidence that your plan, your business continuity plan, and your incident management plan is based on a good business impact analysis. Because your BIA should have defined what's critical and who does it. And then to check, once you've run exercises, it's saying, how do you know it worked? What lessons were identified? And finally, when you get onto ACT, where's the evidence that this exercising or even real-life incidents has informed your BCMS development? So I'm looking for an audit trail. And when I did an inspection of the police, at one point, they were very keen to show me their plan, but I wanted to look for evidence of this plan, do, check and act. And so I said to them, have you had a disruption? And you can answer this question yourself. Have you had a disruption in the last 12 months in your organisation? If you had, can I see the minutes from the debrief following that? And from the debrief, can I see the action plan? And can I see how that's influenced your refresh of your business continuity plans? Now, if you can show me evidence of that, you're showing me evidence of a system, plan, do, check and act. I want to finally just end with a few thoughts about how to get buy-in using marketing, because what you're trying to get is a message out there. And one thing people sometimes do is get lost in their understanding of business continuity and what it involves, and then just does a one-size-fits-all. What marketing tells you is that you need to segment who you're trying to talk to out of all your stakeholders, internally and externally, and what they need to know. You need to sell the benefits, not the features. So you may not talk about ISO 22301, but you may talk about this is going to help you if you get a phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's that sort of thing. What does business continuity actually give the person you're talking to? So if you do it right, it may mean that you keep a job, that your organisation is fit for purpose and increases its reputation. And for some of you, increases market share. And if you've done any marketing, you may have heard of the 4 Ps. We're trying to think of it from the customer's point of view, looking at customer value rather than product, what's in it for them. Instead of saying how much it costs, what sort of price is it, it's the cost, thinking about what effort it will be for you to engage managers. Why should they work with you? What's in it for them? Instead of place, it becomes convenient to sell this at the right time of day. Is it convenient for them to understand? Can you go to one of their meetings rather than come to you, etc.? Instead of just promoting it and putting it out in leaflets or on the web, it's about listening. It's a dialogue, communication. And you're trying to move people from unawareness to action. So some people may not have heard the term. You need to think about what you want them to do, not just make them aware of what it is, but what you want them to do. But just bear in mind, another thing marketing, I think, is pretty good at is breaking down behaviours. Some people in your organisation would like to be the first, and you can think of them. They're always the people who volunteer. There's others who will do it when everyone else has done it. But crucially, look at this, 16%, no matter what you do, marketers say they just don't want to buy, they're not interested. And sometimes we beat ourselves up over these 16%, whereas really concentrate on the 80-20 rule. get most people with you. And there's some useful lessons there to think about how you're going to roll this out in your organisation. Start small, success breeds success. So what you're after in terms of is it up to standard, this is a diagram of any organisation. You start at the top here. What is your organisation for? So what's its aim? Why are you in existence? What do you do to achieve that aim? So what's your key products and services? Then how do those services get produced? There's certain activities. What do you need in terms of resources in order to deliver those activities to produce your key products and services? They don't happen by themselves. They need to be a management process. What happens when it goes wrong? And you're dependent on a supply chain coming in, whether it's data, funding, supplies, whatever. Most organisations, in fact all organisations, work to some extent in this model, which is called MARIO, M-A-R-I-O, a MARIO model of an organisation. And all business continuity is saying, if that's your organisation, where's the evidence that you've looked at plan, do, check and act for each of the critical areas of your business? And that's what the standard is written by. And if you can demonstrate you've looked at your organisation and understood how it works, and you've looked at how you might protect it by looking at if it goes wrong, what will you do, and you've tested those arrangements, that's showing that you've got the building blocks in place of a resilient organisation. So as I said, I work at the Houses of Parliament, and when I first started, one of the senior people said to me, can you give us assurance that this place is resilient? And how would you answer that for your own organisation? Can you give assurance that this organisation is resilient? I was able to say, because we're following industry best practice, BS 25999, now ISO 22301, that we have the building blocks in place. I could give evidence of that, and we've had it externally audited. I didn't want to say, yes, we will be able to respond to anything, but we have the building blocks in place. One of the areas that you need to look at then finally is competence, and how do you demonstrate that you are competent in this area? I think it's clause 7 in ISO 22301. It used to be 3.2.4 in 25399. Says anybody with a role needs to be competent. For the specialist practitioners, you will need to demonstrate this through being certified by the BCI, is one way of doing it, and that is learning this book, Good Practice Guidelines, sitting a 2-hour exam, 120 questions, multiple choice, and that will give you the certificate of business continuity management, which will then enable you to apply for membership. So to end with, when we look at the question, is your organisation resilient? What we'll be looking for is evidence that you've got competent staff and that you've got a competent system in place.